She's a bit nervous. I think she gets nervous, and understandably, because she's staying in unusual surroundings. Although this is the third, maybe even the fourth time I've looked after her, so she's very used to it now. She seems to settle in really quickly. But anyway, welcome back everybody to another episode of Tell Me Where I'm Going Wrong. This is a podcast where two exes talk about whatever is on their mind, whether that's weight loss injection drugs or the state of US politics or the ongoing saga to get Gaga tickets. My name is Josh, and I'm one of the hosts.
And I'm Sean. I'm one of the hosts.
The other host, the only other host.
Yeah.
And welcome back.
I'm the host with the most.
Are you?
Yeah.
You're the host with the most weight to lose.
Uh-huh.
And that's terrible.
I definitely am.
No. Losing weight is not a competition.
It is not. It is not. Although, unless you're a contestant on The Biggest Loser.
Oh my God. Well, we don't even have time to go there. How
problematic that is. What a wild show that was.
I know.
Does it still exist?
I don't think so. Well, certainly if it did, it would probably be only the US one that still exists. But was it Gillian Michaels? And, what was his name? Matthew? No, not Matthew. Anyway, it was a very problematic show. But the last biggest loser related news story I remember was a couple of years ago, and Gillian Michaels said some really shit stuff about Lizzo, and just like horrible body shaming, fat shaming shit. So,
have you seen that news about Lizzo this week?
No,
she's always getting dragged for something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this week she was on the podcast. I think it maybe was on with Bob and Monet, Bob the drag queen and Monet Exchange, the two drag performers who have a podcast called Sibling Rivalry. And it's the one episode I didn't watch. I watch it every week, but for some reason last week I didn't watch it. I was busy, or I can't remember what was happening.
Busy trying to get Gaga tickets, probably.
I think it might have been Gaga-related frenzy that stopped me from doing it. But Lizzo was on it, and the soundbite that's been making the rounds was her saying that Janet Jackson is the queen of pop, and that Madonna owes her career to Janet Jackson, and that Madonna grew up watching Janet Jackson on TV and was inspired by her. And I'm like, okay, I can understand somebody having the opinion that Janet Jackson is more important musically or sonically or culturally, but to have it so messed up the timeline and not understand
not understand who Janet Jackson was and who she became and when she became Janet Jackson as we know today.
Yeah. She didn't become Janet Jackson, the pop megastar, until well into Madonna's career. Well, a couple of years at least into Madonna's career.
Yeah.
Now, to think that...
But Lizzo's young, isn't she? Like, Lizzo's probably only like in her 30s, I think.
Maybe.
So I guess, like maybe she just... Because we kind of lived through that period, whereas she, for her, it's all sort of retro music. I don't know.
But if you're going to go on a podcast and have this hot take about Janet Jackson being the forerunner of this title of Queen of Pop, you would think you would at least be a little bit informed on the history of what you're talking about.
Well, you could argue that, if podcasts were only reserved for those with well-researched and informed opinions, I'm not sure we would actually be doing what we're doing right now, this very second. But
I was thinking, could you, in any capacity of your understanding of who Madonna is and who Janet Jackson is, could you make the argument that Janet Jackson was sort of the forerunner or the person to come first and pave the way?
No, and I don't have any, as much as I was a big Madonna fan in the past, I have no loyalty in that sense anymore. I think both Madonna and Janet Jackson drew on so many pop culture references and drew inspiration, and whether that even sort of tipped over into the complete appropriation, perhaps, of other people's artistic output. Um, and they both did it in a very stylized, and well put together way. And that's really, I think, where the comparison ends. I don't, I don't see really any crossover inspiration in their careers, except I suppose, like you could say, that they both flirted with the whole sort of S&M um, imagery is seen a little bit around the same time. Maybe Janet was slightly ahead of Madonna in that sense, but
Well, no, don't you think that Madonna changed a lot of artists' opinion to sex and sexuality?
well, yeah, definitely.
Because Janet didn't start getting into all of that sexy, really sort of erotic, not erotic, like explicit references to sex until, I suppose, the Velvet Rope album.
Which was long after, Erotica.
So yeah, like many years, like 7 years. No, not 7 years. What? When did Erotica come out? 91, 92?
93? No? 92 or 93. But anyway, I mean, I think they just both were always a little bit ahead of the game. They were always keeping their ear to the ground. And when I say they, I mean not just them as individuals, but their entire team, their management, their record label, even the kind of company they kept. I think they were always keeping their ear to the ground to see, what was going to be the next kind of big thing that blew up. And they were always trying to stay one step ahead of that. But
so Erotica came out in 1992, the album. What number album do you think that was for Madonna?
Are you including You Can Dance as an album?
I doubt it. No, studio album, like not a remix.
5?
Yeah, it was. But so that was 92, and The Velvet Rope came out, let's have a look.
Tappa Tappa.
In 97.
Okay, so big gap.
5 years, almost 5 years. Well, yeah, because they both came out in October. So it was a 5-year difference. So, from that point of view, like you can see that, Madonna sort of paved the way. Not saying that she was 100% responsible for Janet taking that artistic direction. Mm-hmm. But if you were going to argue anyone influenced anyone, I mean, Madonna probably had 2 albums out by the time Janet hit the big time.
Mm.
Janet did have records out before Madonna, but they weren't hits. They were like maybe bubbling under hits or R&B hits, or like, number 49 on, like, they used to have the black music charts in the US. And so, and she was famous because of being on TV shows like Good Times and Different Strokes. And she was famous because of her family being so incredibly well known. But she wasn't a musical force to be reckoned with.
Right. Do you know how today it's almost par for the course that a woman pop star is going to be on stage surrounded by dancers and, a mix of genders, or a spectrum of genders. And I'm trying to think, before Madonna and before Janet, who was doing that? Was that always a thing, or did they sort of refine that, or did they lead the way in that sense? Because I mean, that's to me, that's really where the similarity ends, in that they were both women pop stars surrounded, for most of their career, surrounded by, lithe, sexy young dancers. And when did that become a thing? Who pioneered that?
Well, probably the first person that I can remember in my lifetime having a dance troupe sort of thing was probably Madonna.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, can you think of anybody else from when you were young?
Well, that's what I'm trying to, you know how my memory is, but I'm trying to think back to, before Madonna. I mean, we've talked about Five Star on the podcast before, but that's different because they were a group. Yeah. I'm trying to think of solo singers before that, and my mind's just gone blank.
I mean, probably Michael Jackson
Yeah.
he would have done shows with dancers on stage.
Yeah, but
You know,
not. Yeah,
like
I
because you
don't.
even think like Thriller, when like obviously in music
Yeah,
videos, but then when he performed them live, there would have been dancers on stage dancing with him.
yeah,
People
true.
who were not part of a band
Hmm.
who were there to support that. Madonna, but I don't know. Like,
Because
yeah,
I'm thinking of like who are Madonna's contemporaries? People like Cyndi Lauper. She didn't really have that, you know.
no, or Pat Benatar, or
No,
you
no.
know, yeah, anyone. Like you name any woman singer, like Roberta Flack, Dionne Warwick,
Yeah, it was always just maybe
like
kind of them and the band.
Sheena Easton, anyone, Olivia Newton-John. Yeah, I mean,
Mm.
there maybe were sometimes dancers on stage with them but not really to that degree of that Michael, Madonna, and Janet did it.
Mm.
And then,
Yeah.
obviously Janet took it to another level of, Rhythm Nation. And I mean, it became her signature thing to have a whole troupe of dancers on stage with her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and they almost were her gang, like even some of them were on the records, like doing spoken word parts, or they became part of her crew and they were in all the music videos.
Mm.
And I think it was all just professional part playing. I don't think they were her real friends,
Mm.
but it became a thing, especially around the Janet album. Like after Rhythm Nation, like these people started becoming personalities. Like when I met Janet Jackson and I met some of her dancers, we knew all the dancers' names.
Mm.
Like we would say hello to them, and they had fans.
Mhm.
um, but
Yeah, it's interesting the sort of the evolution of the pop star and how I think from early on Janet had, a mix of genders, whereas Madonna tended to be surrounded by men
yeah,
until a bit later on, things like in the girly show, I think she had some
yes,
women dancers, didn't
yeah,
she?
but like, but even when she first started touring, like with the Virgin tour,
Mm.
she had two male dancers with her
Mm.
who were pretending to sing. I don't think they were really singing, were they?
I
Like,
don't know. I don't
I
know.
don't know if they were
I haven't
singing.
watched that. I haven't watched that concert video in about 30 years. So.
And so she didn't have a big troupe of people on stage with her.
No.
And then so I think it was around the same time,
Who's
like,
that girl? Who's that girl? That tour was kind of the start of it, wasn't it? When she had a
yeah, so
few
I
more.
think it was probably Madonna and Michael around the same time sort of broke that wall down. So he would have been like on the Bad tour. She would have been
Mm.
doing Who's That Girl? And yeah, they would have started. But even so, Michael always lent more to sort of like a live rock band experience still then. So we would have had some dancers, but Madonna was often front and center with just the dancers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the band were often off. I mean, even her
Yeah. The
last
band.
tour, I don't think there was even a band. Like,
No, there wasn't. It was all pre-recorded
but
instrumentals.
and yeah, so she went from two dancers to then the Who's That Girl tour, where there was like a smattering of different dancers doing different things. Like, they had break dancers, and
Mm.
then there was that little kid dancing with her on stage. To
Felix
then
Howard.
moving on to 1990 with the Blonde Ambition tour, where it was like full, like the dancers were the dance troupe were the stars of the show. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it really was Madonna and Janet that took that into the mainstream at around identical times.
And now
But
it's just it's ubiquitous, right? Like
yeah, and even
most.
somebody who's not known as a dancer, like Chapel Rowan, like she did that performance at the music award show a few weeks
Mhm.
ago where she sang Pink Pony Club with a dance group.
Yeah.
Because it's synonymous with live spectacle now, or live
Mm.
pop spectacle is to have dancers dancing with you.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all been non-stop talking about Gaga, and she's another one that has run with that
Mm-hmm.
that trend of, or that inspiration of having a dance crew and a dance troupe with you on stage. What do you think of Lizzo and Lizzo's music?
I don't know that much of her music. I there are a couple of songs I love. Like I love Water Me. I like the one she did for the Barbie film. That's fun. There's Juice is good. But I don't. It's not like I've done a sort of deep dive. And you hear all the sort of the stories, don't you, about that? Speaking of dancers, it was one of her dancers that accused her of sort of,
Yeah.
I don't know, I may be misquoting it, but I think it was something like sexual harassment,
Yeah.
or at best inappropriate workplace behaviour.
Hmm.
So you do hear the stories, but yeah, I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. What about you?
When you hear something about that, like about Lizzo and her being accused of that, how does that make you feel about her? So you have like a sort of a non-committal feeling about her before that. You're like, yes, some of the music's good, some of it's not for me. But then that something like that comes out, she denies it. There are people that are standing by what they said. How does that make you feel? Does that change your opinion of her?
Not really, because you never really know, like, where the truth lies, I suppose. And I don't know her personally, and so it doesn't. I suppose until somebody is sort of um, has their day in court, both metaphorically and literally, and unless somebody is charged with a crime and is found guilty in a court of law, at that point, I think at that point I can have an informed or somewhat informed opinion on who they are as a person and whether I want to consume any of their, artistic output. Uh,
But like it's not always the law isn't always reliable,
well, no, as we
and so
discussed, yeah.
it's a bit more nuanced than that, isn't it? Like when you talk about believing survivors or victims,
Hmm.
sometimes you make a personal ethical judgment call on what feels true to you.
Hmm.
Like we're talking about Michael Jackson. I I don't appreciate Michael Jackson, his art, and it's because of what I perceive him to have been while he was alive,
Hmm.
based on what people have said about him. And so that he was never, well, I don't know if he was found guilty or not, but he was,
Well,
I mean,
no, I think there was an out of court settlement, and
yeah,
that's the sort of that's the crux of it, or that's the sort of the sticking point that a lot of people who are still Michael fans today will say, well, they settled out of court, so of course he's innocent. And it's like, well, I don't think that proves or disproves anything. I think at best you can say his behavior was inappropriate. you
yeah,
know I
yeah.
mean, at the very fucking best, it was
Like,
inappropriate behavior with
yeah.
children.
And this is one thing that I don't really get when I don't talk with many Michael fans, but when I hear of the conversations around it, is that even if you said, okay, he didn't commit crimes, he admitted to letting children that were not his children sleep in the same bed as him while he was
As an adult,
an
yeah.
adult,
Yeah.
and he would pay for their families to go on vacations so they weren't there. If I can't see anybody who could argue that that was appropriate,
I
like
know. I know.
so even if you don't think it was criminal
Or if there's a sexual element or
or a
anything.
sexual element, whatever, why would you think that that was okay to do with
I
children
know.
that are not your children?
I
Like,
know.
it's so bizarre to me that people defend that behavior.
I
But
know.
it's that cult of personality and what that he was the sort of extreme pinnacle of how people idolize somebody
Hmm.
and build them up to almost be like a god, and
Hmm.
that there's nothing they could do. Whereas, there are people like Lizzo who has not reached that level of fame, that if something comes out that's questionable about her behavior or people have accused her, it's going to affect her ability to, be a star, I suppose, because,
Mm. Mm.
people, she doesn't have that sway. I mean, Michael Jackson, if he had stayed alive, would have been able to tour, sell out tours for the rest of his life, no matter what came out about him. He had
Yeah.
surpassed criticism.
Yeah.
Of course, a lot of people still said things about him and he had opinions about him, but his super fans would never have,
Mm.
you know,
What's the what's the what's the song on the new Gaga album? And it sounds very Michael.
shadow of a man.
Shadow of a Man. Yeah.
Yeah.
That, and I even listening to that, I'm like, oh, so referencing Michael's an interesting artistic choice. But I mean, there is, I suppose, even if there was irrefutable evidence that he'd committed acts of sexual misconduct or criminal acts of with those children, I suppose his musical legacy has kind of surpassed all of that. It's kind of because he died, his musical legacy can live on. Maybe if he'd stayed alive and had been, tried and found guilty of crimes, maybe that would have tarnished his musical legacy. But now the fact that he's died, uh, maybe that kind of allows that musical legacy to live on, somewhat detached from the accusations or from the artist.
But also, I think we look through music through a very narrow lens sometimes. Michael wasn't as groundbreaking musically as he was as a performance artist.
Yeah.
His music was
Well,
of the time,
and it was his, he a lot of it was his work with Quincy.
Yeah,
And
and it was, there would have been hundreds of other artists at the same time using similar sounds, disco beats with rock vocals, and they didn't make it, or they weren't Michael Jackson, or he was the person who was at the forefront. Very similar to what happened with Madonna, with like disco pop crossing over into the mainstream and her being hailed as the voice of that, whereas she was, she was singing what a lot of other people were singing and using the same beats and the same production techniques. Same with Michael. There would have been even the same if you go today with Chapel Roan. How many other people have a similar sort of sound to that? And so I think, like it's easy for us to say, oh, it's just like a Michael copy, but it's actually there's a whole genre of
that's
music
true.
from around that time. And it's like any of those songs on the Mayhem record, you listen to them, you can hear like multiple influences. Do you, I was going to say something else about Gaga, but maybe we should not talk about
I was
Gaga
just going to say,
anymore.
maybe we can't make this like a Gaga Stan podcast. Maybe we need to.
Talking of sexual abuse and crimes of that nature,
Yeah.
did you see the news about Russell Brand?
Yes. So he's finally been charged. I mean, I thought he was charged about 3 years ago or something. I don't. I mean, I know how slow the criminal justice system works, but
Yeah.
I honestly thought he'd already been charged because the accusations came out about 3 years ago, didn't they? Was it 3
Maybe,
years
yeah.
ago?
I think
Two, 2.5 years
I
ago?
think the investigation has been going on for 3 years.
Right. And it's taken all that time to actually press, press charges, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's unfair or unwise, perhaps, to speculate on something before it goes to court. But I
Yeah.
mean, I think the court of public opinion is very much that, like he's at best, his behaviour is inappropriate.
Well, I mean, what he's been charged with isn't just sleeping in the bed with somebody. He's been charged with
Multiple acts of rape.
rape and sexual assault.
Yeah.
It's against more than one person. So these charges relate to more than one person.
Yeah.
Over a period of time.
So that's what I mean. I think most people kind of look at the facts and they'll be like, well, yeah, dude's he's not a nice guy.
Has there ever been an incident of somebody being called out or publicly named as like a sexual offender where you've thought you don't think it's true? Like, say we're talking about Michael Jackson or Russell Brand. We think there is some element of misconduct or inappropriateness there, probably based on our own common sense and the court of public opinion. Has there ever been a situation where you've thought, oh no, that doesn't sound right to me?
No, actually, it doesn't. And I think, I mean, I was going to say, I'm trying to think of an example where a woman has been accused of that behaviour, and I
Well,
don't think.
Lizzo about the
Well,
sexual
yeah, true.
misconduct, like inappropriate, and for me, like I don't, I don't not, I don't not believe those people, but I think Lizzo might believe that things happened differently than they did.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, but that's once
yeah.
again, I'm very uninformed
I,
outsider opinion.
I, no, I've never. I mean, outside of Lizzo, I mean, all the other cases, yeah, I can think of have been men, and I've never thought, oh, I'm not sure, that doesn't sound right, or he seems like such a nice man, you know. I've never thought that, and I thinking about it now, just sort of off the cuff, I think that's just because I think a lot of men, uh, and not even just straight men, I just think a lot of men have some very problematic behaviors. I mean, a lot of people do, but I think, because of centuries or millennia of patriarchal privilege, I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of men think they can get away with a lot of very inappropriate things, and I see it. I see it in so many areas of life, whether it's just the kind of language that men use to talk about women, or whether it's Russell Brand being accused of multiple accounts of rape by multiple people. I think it never really comes as that much of a surprise, sadly. What about you? Have you ever had an experience where you thought, oh, maybe they're innocent?
No, I don't. I don't think I ever have. Um, do you know who is that singer? What's his name? Let me just look it up. And he's in an indie band, and let me just have a look
Do
as I
some
look it
live
up.
live
I,
research.
I don't want to.
You don't want to name and shame the wrong person, that's for sure.
Okay, so Connor, I don't know how you pronounce his last name. Um, Oberst. How would you pronounce his
Oh
name?
yeah,
O
yeah.
B E R
Oberst.
S T.
Oberst.
Oberst.
I don't know. I could be mispronouncing that.
He's the singer songwriter from a band called Bright Eyes.
Mhm.
So in December 2013, Oberst was accused of sexual assault by a female fan, leading to widespread media coverage. However, by July 2014, she had retracted the accusation, stating that the accusations were 100% false and that her actions were wrong and could undermine the claims of actual sexual assault victims, and for that I apologize. So he had denied it the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
After a bit of time, she said, "Yeah, I didn't. I made this up for a few reasons, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
attention, whatever it was. I don't know." Um, and he spoke like it. The band stopped, his career stopped, and
Mm-hmm.
they were quite a big indie band.
Mm.
And he lost a lot of people in his life because of it.
Mm-hmm.
And but he said what makes me think differently about him is that his statement on it after the fact was he didn't want to minimize how frequently women are sexually assaulted, and said that as painful and surreal and fucked up as my situation was, I don't ever want to use this as an example to justify anything, like to justify not believing women. Like he was
Yeah,
like, it happens so much that
yeah,
I didn't do this, and this person has now said I didn't do it, but
yeah,
I don't want to be out there saying, don't believe women,
yeah, yeah. Of
you
course,
know?
because that's a horrible, horrible kind of narrative to put out into the world.
And,
Yeah.
there's the band Arcade Fire,
Mm-hmm.
and the lead singer had sort of inappropriate accusations of inappropriate and power imbalance leveled at him from fans.
Mm-hmm.
And he came out and said, yeah, I did all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of fans were like, oh, okay, well, he was using sort of coercive or power imbalance structures to, have sex with fans. And he is in a relationship with a woman who's in the band as well.
Right.
And his brother was in the band as well, and his brother quit the band around the same time,
Mm-hmm.
but never made a statement about why.
Mm-hmm.
And then his wife or his partner, who's in the band, she said, look, this is really messed up, but we're sticking together, we're a family, and they still tour.
Okay.
And there's a lot of fans that really struggle with going to see them because they mean a lot to a lot of people, and he didn't commit a crime. It was just really shitty behavior.
Yeah.
And the people said I felt used by him, or I was vulnerable, or, you know, there were people.
I mean, it's the entertainment industry in all its forms is just such. It just creates such a horrible situation where abuses of power are so easy to commit, and it just, I don't know, it really, I don't think, you know, I don't think that you can excuse people's behavior. I don't think, you know, people who sexually assault people should ever be, you know, let off, or, you know, I don't know. It just, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I know what I'm trying to say. I'm just trying to think how to articulate it. Like,
it's not just a entertainment business thing either. I mean, people use positions of power and power imbalance to abuse or coerce people all the time in all walks of life, like religion, business.
Well, that's what what's her name? Fran Lebowitz, you know, the comedian. You know, she said when...
Isn't Fran Lebowitz a photographer?
No, that's Annie Leibovitz.
Oh, who's Fran Lebowitz?
Is it Fran Lebowitz? It's Fran. I'm sure it's Lebowitz, her last name.
Fran Drescher?
No, not Fran Drescher. Well, she's got her own history with sexual assault as well, hasn't she? But no, Fran Lebowitz. I'm sure that's her name. Anyway,
Fran Lebowitz is an American author and public speaker.
Yeah, that's her. And she said something similar. And she said, you know, the whole... I mean... her comments drew a lot of criticism at the time, but she said with the whole Me Too movement, she was like, I don't care about these actresses. I don't give a shit about these actresses, you know, being propositioned in a hotel room. What I care about is the you know, immigrant I think she said chambermaid, like the immigrant, you know, cleaner who has to go in and clean those rooms, and she's the one who's probably being serially assaulted or propositioned by horrible men in her life. But where's the attention for that, you know? And that obviously true.
Yeah, I can see why that would be problematic. I mean, we don't need to dismiss somebody else's well-being or concerns for their well-being in support of somebody else. Like,
no, exactly. But that was her sort of.
But I suppose that's kind of like a dramatic way of saying this is a double standard here for, you know, women of color and migrant women. Yeah. But the now I forget what I was going to say. Talking about horrible men, like Andrew Tate has also been in the news a lot. Forever, for years. Yeah. And did you see the news about him? Like him and his brother got some sort of pardon from Donald Trump to go to the US.
To travel back to the States, but I think they have to go and face a judge back in Europe, or maybe they've already done that. I try not to follow too much of him because it's so upsetting, it's so awful, it's so clearly obvious to me and most people I think around me that his narrative, his behavior, his comments are just disgusting.
But you know what's more disgusting and upsetting to me than him is the system of celebrity around him, and how people are willing to celebrate him no matter what. Similar to Donald Trump, and similar to, you know, people like Russell Brand, that in light of all of the evidence that would make any sort of level-headed person with common sense think, yeah, this guy is into bad stuff. These people still celebrate these men and look at them as heroes. So the other day, Andrew Tate, it was on the news that his girlfriend went to the police and said in a hotel room in the US the other day, he became rough during sex with me and injured me during it. And she went to the police and showed them bruising, and there were photos of her on the news saying that he was choking her against her consent. And it's just like, okay, so the human trafficking wasn't enough for you people? This woman coming forward and saying he was choking me without my consent. him admitting on camera to different versions of like harassing or intimidating women
or
or
violence
denigrating
or
women.
threatening behavior. Yeah,
What's the
I
line
know,
for people? And that to me is the depressing thing,
I
that
know.
there is no line. So someone like the president of the United States can be found liable for rape or sexual assault, can say denigrating things about women all his life, and can then still be elected the president. There's no line for people. And that's the danger, that people don't hold people accountable, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, and I think the saddest thing about all of that, I mean, I'm getting ahead of myself, but the saddest thing I think would be hypothetically if Donald Trump, if his downfall was because he crashed the economy, not because he's a disgusting sexual predator, a convicted rapist, that he's just a foul, horrible man. It would be really fucking tragic to me if he goes down in history as, oh, he lost the presidency because he crashed the economy. Like somehow that is so much more important than, basic human rights.
Yeah.
But talking about Andrew Tate, I don't think you've watched it, but I watched a show on the weekend, which a lot of people in the UK have been watching recently. It's just a 4-episode thing on Netflix called Adolescence, and it's fiction, but it's very much, informed by the manosphere. It's informed by Andrew Tate, and it's just it really, you know, sometimes those shows come along and it just makes you really stop and think about what, as a society, we are doing or what we're doing wrong. And it's so well shot. I mean, each episode is one continuous shot, and or at least it appears to be anyway. And it was, I mean, incredibly performed, incredibly well acted. The 14-year-old kid was so good. I mean, all of the acting was tremendous.
Yeah.
But it just, it took a societal problem and just put it into a very personal, very micro level. No, micro level. And I just, it is really sad because, I mean, I suppose our human instinct in these situations is to and this goes back to what I was trying to sort of articulate earlier and probably struggle to, that when men or boys, depending on where you draw the distinction, when they commit these acts, it's very easy to get caught up in the individual that's committing it. So someone like Russell Brand, he commits or has been accused, let's say for legal purposes, he's been accused of these sexual assaults and rapes. But again, there are so many that go unreported. There are so many that don't ever get to have a day in court. There are so many, and there have been so many in human history as well. And that TV show I watched, it made me really think about that. Even though they were fictional characters, it was just that thing of, well, this is a problem. It's a societal problem. We're all responsible. We may not want to think that way. We may want it's easier for us to sort of demonize the individual who commits the crime. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't be found guilty. I'm not saying they shouldn't face consequences, but it's not enough just to convict one individual in any of this. We need to talk about how to fix society, how to make things better.
Things feel like, not to be a pessimist, but things feel like they're spiraling out of control with, the rise of AI and the rise of people like Andrew Tate, the rise of insulated communities that can create and govern themselves and have their own rules and set their own expectations. So people are siloing off into these little groups where they're not answerable to the greater community or the greater social contracts that we've spent millennia creating about how we treat each other with decency or we follow rules. And so people, like in this instance, we're talking about young men, are being able to just be in an echo chamber where they can talk about how great they are, how shit women are, and how they're not the problem, or they're not even part of the problem, and that they deserve more kudos and congratulations for being heroes, and they don't need to be held accountable. This is happening so much, and it's becoming more pronounced as technology enters our lives more.
Well,
And
yeah, and I don't really know what the solution is, other than just like all social media just be like pulled. You know what
so
I mean?
in this show that you watched,
Mhm.
did they explore the themes of social media much?
Oh yeah, yeah. It was all about somebody being sort of radicalized to the manosphere through social media, and I don't think they. Oh no, they did name Andrew Tate. Actually, they did sort of name check him in that. Not so much in the specific, the specific case, but in terms of the general sort of discourse around masculinity and around women.
Mhm.
But talking about what you're saying about how not to be pessimistic, but I also just read last week, so a couple of days before I watched this show, Adolescence, I read an article and it was talking more about porn, and it was talking about how algorithms these days are naturally sort of steering like porn consumers towards uh, uh, not explicit child porn, but they are really pushing algorithms towards like an age difference within porn, which of course is a step away from um, child pornography. And the statistic I read, which I had to write it down because it absolutely, um, I just found it terrifying and awful. Um, this article said that in England and Wales alone, more than 850 men every month are arrested for online child abuse offences. And that number,
850?
850 a month in England and Wales alone. And that number is going up year
Where
on
did that
year.
source come from? What's the source of that?
I don't know. I'll have to go back and find the article and see what their sources were. But it was so. I just thought,
But what does
and they're
that
the ones.
mean?
They're the
What
ones
does
getting
that mean?
caught. What do you mean?
Like when it says 850 arrested for what? Like
For online child abuse offences. So that would be having inappropriate images,
sharing content.
pornographic, storing or sharing pornographic content involving minors. And I just and they interviewed some people, and some of the men in this article just complete acknowledged their culpability, and they said, yeah, I realize now how wrong it was. I was depressed, and I started I got addicted to porn, and then the websites, I got into these user groups, and then like someone shared images with me, and at first I was shocked, but then anyway, and then other men were just saying, yeah, like, oh, I had no idea, and I accept responsibility for it, but I had no idea that they were minors in the photograph. So it's like a whole
Well, it's like a perfect
spectrum of.
storm, isn't it, of all of these things converging to to lead to this. So you've got people like
Mhm.
you've got technology
Yeah.
advancing at a rate that doesn't seem to have much constraint to it. You've got people being able to make a living from being antagonistic or controversial online, whereas you didn't used to be able to, through traditional media, you, you didn't used to be able to be celebrated for that through traditional media. You would exist in the shadows. But now you've got people like Andrew Tate or Nick Fuentes or whoever, from being misogynists, they have become rich and are celebrated. So you've got that going on. You've got unbridled pornography, and I'm not being anti-porn here. I'm just saying the way that it is disseminated,
Yeah, totally.
it's unbridled, and it has technology that reads information from your habits to then push you further down that road. So,
Yeah.
like you're saying, like if I mean, I'm not going to pretend I've never looked at porn. Like if you go to a porn site, there are categories where it tells you that the people in the video look like they're younger than 18.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
legally they're not, because obviously people are 18. And so it starts to it's I suppose it's trying to appeal to people who have that predisposition to that sort of thing, but
Yeah.
it also does condition people
Yeah, well,
to
that's
think
it.
that that is attractive.
And we talk a lot, we've spoken a lot about, X or Twitter, or whatever you want to call it, how that these days just is feeding us more and more violent imagery, which is not something we want to see, but the algorithms seem to be steered towards that. And a lot of people are saying, in this article, were saying a similar thing, that, they had no interest in child pornography, and yet sort of bit by bit, the algorithms were kind of almost breaking them down, and breaking down their resistance to it, or not even resistance. Like the algorithms were, like planting the seed of ideas, and then sort of cultivating it. And I honestly don't know what the solution is to that, or to the Andrew Tate thing, to the manosphere shit. And
well,
yeah.
What's the term for when somebody is like skeptical or negative about technology? What's that?
A cynic?
No, there's a term to do with it.
Technophobe.
Yeah, but not scared of it. It's like there's a term for when you talk about the negative ramifications outweigh the positive. So it's not you're scared of it. There's a term. I can remember when I was at uni, we talked about it, because I can remember the teachers telling us you have to be mindful of technology without crossing over into this, because there's so many good things about technology as well.
Yeah.
But I can't remember the terminology for it.
I mean, we are in the digital age, and there are so many, all the forms of media that we grew up on were regulated, not always as well as they should have been or could have been, but they were regulated.
Sometimes too much.
Yeah. And now it's the Wild West. There is no. I mean, it's lawless. It really is lawless out there. Like I could go online within like 3 clicks. I could find any number of like horrific images or stuff, content. It's really scary. And I don't know what's the solution. We just.
I'm not finding the word I mean, but this search brought up the word Luddite, but that's not the word that.
Digi-skeptic, tech
I can't remember what it was, but so I don't want to be like a technophobe or a Luddite or whatever the term is that I'm trying to think of.
Yeah.
But we are barreling down this, road where. I think what we're talking about, we're giving reasoned opinion, and we're being mindful, and we're trying to be caring of people around us, even people we don't know. We're trying to choose our language carefully. We're trying to put some positivity into the world. But for this podcast, there would be 1,000 where people are just saying the most outrageous, inflammatory things that is harmful to themselves and the community.
Yeah.
So, and when there used to be 4 TV channels in the city you grew up in when we were kids, it's like there's a TV channel for every human alive. Like anyone, if they've got access to the technology, can start a YouTube channel and say whatever they want. I mean, there are some limits to that, but then there are other platforms where there are no limits. Yeah. So, I run a lot of events in London, and I have done for like 15 years. And, we sometimes have problems within the community of, antisocial behavior. Now, that might be somebody like a man acting a certain way towards women. It could be, I don't know what some other examples are. That's always the first one that springs to mind.
Well, the one that comes to mind is someone exposing their genitalia to patrons at an event, but that's definitely not for here.
Right. So things happen. What I try and do is, as an individual who has taken sort of a leadership role in the community, with the support of other people who are caring within the community who come to my events, we try to manage the behavior of that individual and the safety of the group. So some of us are meeting on the weekend to have a discussion about the general approach to the safety of women in particular at our group, and how we might manage that as a group. We can't rely on the government or the police or the goodwill of other humans. No. We as a collective need to create and talk about a social contract that we can use and put in place to protect each other, especially the women in the group, from these negative forces
And
and
that's
these
great.
oppressive
That's
forces.
great. That's what needs to happen on a micro level and a macro level.
Yeah.
And it needs to involve everyone. It needs to involve men, particularly because they're the ones that commit, they're the ones that commit most of the sexual crimes against women. And that's, what I was saying before, it got me really thinking about, even though they were fictional characters in this TV show, it's so, it's the criminal justice system is reactive. You have to wait for a crime to be committed, and then you have to go through the legal process, through the courts, and then someone may get sentenced and put in prison. That doesn't solve the problem. That's just one individual who has been committing acts found guilty. That doesn't address the root cause. And that, to me, was what I took away from that TV show, and also from reading that article, is just that how do we address this? And that's great, what you were saying. I don't know, if you probably can't say too much on the podcast about which group it is, or
Well, it's people from within different organizing groups that are adjacent to the vegan community.
right.
So,
Okay.
some of them might be in a group to do with, I don't know, meeting up to go walking. Some might be
Yeah.
a feminist group. Some might just be a vegan social group. Some might be,
Okay.
but it's people with a collective concern about the broader well-being across all of these groups, because there's crossover,
Yeah.
and we want to make sure that we are united in our approach and our thinking of how to deal with these things. So everyone recognizes that as a problem. I mean, misogyny and mistreatment of women and girls isn't new, but there are new dangers and new avenues of this being, pushed upon women because of, what we're talking about, like technology, people like Andrew Tate, the incel culture, the the sort of the rise in screen violence and the desensitization of young men to violence, and the lack of accountability, because people can be sex offenders but then also become the president of a country. So it all works to corrode the idea of what is right and wrong in young people's brains. And so we've only got each other to try and counteract this, because it's like I said, it's barreling away from us at a breakneck speed.
It's a societal problem, and society needs to come together to fix it. We can't simply rely on laws. Laws take years and years and years to get passed, and even then, the legal system doesn't protect. It penalizes people who are found guilty, but it doesn't protect them from the incident in the first place. It doesn't take that away.
This is something that I've always taken. I tried to take my responsibility, or my share of responsibility, for the well-being of the community, especially as an organizer. I try and, I don't know, like head into like a problem and take the brunt of it. So, but I do find as I'm getting older, that's difficult to do. And it's very emotionally taxing, right? To be responsible for the safety and the well-being of a group. So that's why I suggested to sort of this broader collective of organizers, hey, let's all work on this together. So instead of me, I don't know, just banning one individual person, like you were saying, even that doesn't really solve the problem.
That's just addressing a symptom. It's not dealing with the cause. Yeah.
And, like in the past, this is probably enough time has passed that we can talk about this, but there was somebody in the community 10 years ago or more, I don't know when it was, who had been accused of rape. And this person was ostracized by the community, whatever, rightly so, wrongly so, whatever your opinion on that is. But I didn't feel that even just pushing somebody out of the community goes far enough to addressing the issue the way that we should. So I went out of my way to go and ask this person to their face, is this true? Like, did this happen? And when he had his version of story and everything, I asked him, is he aware of what consent really means? And does he know that rape can look different to different people? And, I won't go into the whole thing, but it was very emotional for him, obviously. I'm not saying people should feel sorry for him, but what men are saying to other men, do you know what assault is? Like, instead of just like saying this person's shit, never talk to them again, how are we stopping that person from going and offending again? How are we holding them accountable in a way that means meaningful change instead of just retribution? And I think it's a very difficult thing to do. And as a survivor of abuse myself, and it's a hard thing for me to do, but meaningful change isn't going to happen if we just punish people. And I mean, we've seen that doesn't work anyway, and most people don't get punished by the systems of
that's
law and judgment that we've got.
That was the whole other side of it, and it was just, you know, how I mean, this in, you know, sorry to hark on about this TV show, but in this TV show, you know, he was an underage offender, so he was in a young offenders institute, or sort of like a young offenders institute, I think. And it's just like, that is, you know, not to say he shouldn't face consequences, but how's that going to help? You know, even if he went away for, you know, 10 years or something, like, he's probably going to become more radicalized in prison, or, you know, like, it's just, you know, prison is such, you know, it's easy to just say, oh, they've got you know, got to send criminals to prison and then just forget about them. But that's just missing the point entirely. And that is that we've all got to work together to improve society and stop these things, and stop these narratives and discourse from existing in the first place, or that these, what people see as permissible behavior, from existing in the first place.
And all we've got, the only powerful tool we've really got to do that is community, because we can't rely on the media to do the right thing, because they champion abusers all the time. We can't rely on individual humans to do the right thing in a vacuum. We can't rely on things just working themselves out. We can't rely on the law or the government. Well, we have to work with
politics in particular. I mean, politics is just a fucking horrible, toxic minefield.
Yeah. So we have to work together as collectives to resist oppression, and to try and, you know, almost reprogram people to act more kindly. But I mean, we're just on a runaway train. I don't know how you stop.
I don't know.
Like, you know, things like AI. I mean, how do we know what checks are in place that people aren't using AI for inappropriate pornography to create images?
Well, they are. There's no.
Yeah, but I mean,
there's no question about if they are. They are.
No, but I mean, what I know people are, but what checks are people using? Are these companies putting in place to track this? I mean,
but
maybe
it doesn't matter, because, I mean, when I said it doesn't matter, I'm saying sort of like, you know, facetiously, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, of course it matters, but in a way it doesn't matter, because whatever checks we put in place, someone else, some other AI model will suddenly spring up, which doesn't adhere to those checks, which doesn't adhere to that level of regulation. And so I don't know. It feels very, this podcast often goes down these dystopian rabbit holes, doesn't it? But that really feels like, you know, one that we're going down with technology.
Well, to change the topic for the last few minutes to something less heavy, can you see these mosquito bites on my arm?
No.
You can't see that?
Oh, yeah, now I can. Yeah.
What were you looking like that?
Well, no, I've got my ring light up, and so that part of your arm was obscured by the ring light. Yeah, I can see them now. Wow.
So, I don't know when it happened. We went to Hackney the other day, Hackney Central, and I went and had a really nice vegan banh mi, Vietnamese sandwich.
I saw you post that.
Yeah, it was lovely. And we walked around, you know, the back of, like, in Hackney near Mare Street, and there's like a cemetery and a park around the back of church. And I think that's where it must have happened, but I didn't feel it at the time.
Show me again. Put them right center of the screen, more to your right. Yeah. Can I just check though? When you were repotting your plants the other day, were you wearing gloves and long sleeves?
This was before that.
Okay.
So the repotting happened after these bites happened, and I didn't do the repotting. Hill did it. I didn't get involved, but it's so sore, and I was thinking, like I was looking at it before because I've got this like stinging cream that I put on it, and I've been putting tea tree oil on it to try and take the pain away, and it is getting a little better. So it's been a couple of days, but it's very painful. And I was thinking, what is the chemical process of a mosquito bite, and why does this happen? But I found out that when a mosquito bites you, it sticks its thing in, and it's called, I wrote it down.
Proboscis, is that
Yeah,
what it's called?
proboscis. Like, what a weird word. But it then, when it's pulling the blood out, it leaves its saliva under your skin. And the saliva then creates like, what do you call it? Like an immune response
Yeah.
to your body,
yeah.
because it's like a foreign object in your body that doesn't match with
Like a
you.
pathogen.
Yeah, pathogen, or a histamine. And it creates this swelling, and it obviously the different people react to it different ways. Have you, I mean, growing up in London, there's not really a big mosquito problem, is there?
No. In the height of summer, you might get them, but they are becoming more common in London with climate change.
So when I was growing up in Australia, it was a really big problem.
Well, yeah, especially in the Brisbane area because of all like the mangrove forests and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I was. Can you just talk for a minute? Just you keep talking about mangroves. One minute.
All right. Well, I was going to quickly tell a story about growing up in London, we didn't really have mosquitoes, but my brother, we used to go on holiday most years, like a summer holiday, family holiday. And my brother was, I don't know if he still is like this, but he used to react so severely to mosquito bites. And I remember one holiday in Greece, I think one stung him on his eye, and it swelled up huge. So his eye was all sort of swollen and stuff. Was someone at the door?
Yeah, someone was at my door. So
it wasn't the Jehovah's Witnesses again, was it?
No. It's somebody coming to inspect the door to see that the fire doors are safe in my building. So I can't miss the appointment. Do you know what I mean? But I think because we've run over a little bit, that I was planning to be off. But did you talk about mangroves?
No, I just was talking about how my brother used to react so severely to mosquito bites. But no, you can talk about mangroves if you want in Brisbane.
So the mangrove areas, how do you describe mangroves if people don't know what they are?
Well, it's sort of like marshy land with like, a forest of mangrove trees, normally around river deltas and along the coast in tropical and subtropical
normally salt
parts
water,
of the world. Yeah, it's a mix of still fresh and salt water.
What do you call that mix of fresh and salt water? It's got a name.
Does it?
Yeah.
Not brackish.
Brackish? I don't know, but that's a good word. I like that.
I think brackish water.
There's a lot of words
brackish water.
I wish I could remember, but I can't.
I can't remember 90% of words.
Yeah, it is brackish.
Brackish, yeah. I only know that through plant geekiness, because at work someone was trying to grow a tropical palm that lives in brackish water, and so he had seeds, and I can't remember, it was like a little bottle, and it said brackish, it had like a label on it, so like brackish salt or something. Or
well, it has to be, like I've just read here that it has to be it has to contain between 0.5 and 30 parts per thousand of dissolved salt. And so if there are types of plants that grow in brackish water and you want to grow them yourself, you have to try and replicate that salinity of the water. But it's often, because the water is not still, it's tidal or it's an estuary, but it's stiller than like an open body of water. It's a perfect breeding ground for mosquito larvae and mosquito nests or whatever. What do you call a mosquito hive? What do you call it?
Mosquito larva.
I know, but is there for the collection of many? Is it a breeding ground or
community?
I don't
know. Gaggle. Gaggle of mosquitoes. Well, I don't know what the collective noun is.
House of mosquito.
A histamine of mosquitoes.
So around where I grew up, north of Brisbane, in a place called Redcliffe, in between Redcliffe and the mainland, because Redcliffe is like a peninsula, there was a lot of brackish water around the backwaters, and the mosquitoes were so ferocious. like when I lived in a house that had gaps between the roof and the floor, I had to buy a mosquito net to hang over my bed, like I lived in the jungle or something, because they were massive. You could hear them like fly past you, like they were so big, and the bites would come up in welts. And the government used to fly these planes over the mangroves to spray this mosquito poison to kill the mosquitoes, to control them, because it was so ferocious and it would cause so many problems for people.
I remember.
But it makes me feel like, I don't know, like it reminds me of this, like, going on holiday when I was a kid to the beach, because there'd be sandflies and mosquitoes and you'd be covered in bites. And we used to try all sorts of remedies, like you would take garlic tablets.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because
they didn't like the taste of garlic or something. Yeah.
Apparently, like the smell of garlic coming out of your pores was like a deterrent for mosquitoes. We would always be covered in like mosquito repellent sprays and creams.
And is it true, or is it like an urban myth that, don't they say that like drinking alcohol makes your blood taste nicer to the mosquitoes or something? Like,
never heard that.
Have you not heard that?
No, I've never heard that. But
I don't know where I heard that, but I'm sure I've heard it.
I feel like now that I've had these bites, and it might not be mosquitoes, it could have been some sort of fleas in the park. I could have been in a restaurant where there were fleas. I don't know. I'm not going to name restaurants.
Bed bugs.
Well, I would think it was bed bugs if it wasn't just me.
Yeah.
But it's also,
and you would have them all over your body.
It's very like it's here and it's one on this elbow, so it makes me feel like, because I had a jacket on, but I took it off when we were in the park for the sun. So this arm I probably sat down, but I didn't sit on the grass. But I get really paranoid about things like that, about flea infestations and bed bugs and.
Yeah.
We had a friend who had a flea infestation on her head, remember?
Yeah, do you remember around that similar era in our lives? Remember when we got that free sofa bed when we were living in Stratford, and we got that free sofa bed, and I think it was flea infested. Remember, we had to throw it out about a week later because I don't remember who was sleeping on it, but they were just like bitten to bits.
You couldn't even sit on it. You couldn't even sit on it and not be bitten. But we just put it outside and somebody else took it. Like that was where we lived there. If we ever wanted to get rid of something, we would just put it outside with a sign saying free to take.
Yeah, it'd be gone in like 5 minutes.
Well, like you'd go in, close the door, look out the window, and it would be gone. Like people would just be always on the lookout for stuff. But anyway, that's
flea-ridden sofas.
This is my drama. I've got these sore mosquito bites, and it got me thinking about the chemical reaction that happens when proboscis, is that it? Proboscis goes in and they deposit saliva under your skin. It's so gross, isn't it?
Is Hill ready for the onslaught of attacks in Australia? Like all the things that are trying to bite you and.
Well, that's what he says. He doesn't ever want to move there because he's scared that spiders are going to get him. He thinks snakes are going to get him. He sees all these videos now online. The algorithms worked out his fears, and it shows little kids being attacked by magpies.
Oh, yeah.
He's heard Michelle tell stories about being attacked by turkeys, geese, and magpies. It's, there's all sorts of things. But when we were there, we saw massive spiders. We were walking around the Roma Street Parklands garden in Brisbane. And, there are big spiders, and you walk between two palm trees, and it's just like this massive network of spiders, and there'll be like 50 massive spiders in there. And he thought he would be more scared than he was. But I think when you see it in context and
Oh, yeah, when you see it in context, it's fine. It's when you go to turn on the light switch in your living room and there's a fucking huntsman spider about 2 inches away from your hand. That's when it gets you.
And, he sees videos of people boxing kangaroos. There's that video online of someone's dog being attacked by a kangaroo and they're punching it, like, actually fist fighting this kangaroo. Like, I don't know, animals are cute and stuff, but sometimes, you hear them scream, like wombats or koalas screaming. And
oh, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I think he'll be all right. I think more to worry about is that the heat and the humidity, because having lived in London for a few years, It's going to be a shock to the system. And, he's from Mexico, and you might think, oh, well, Mexico's hot, but Mexico City isn't humid all year round like Brisbane is. It has
It's quite moderated, the climate.
Yeah, but also it does get a little humid, but it's like for a real period. But like Brisbane is just like relentless. So
dripping with sweat. All right, let's wrap up.
Okay.
Do we need to tell our viewers or listeners anything? I mean, you can find our online antics. We'll put links in the show notes to find us online, where you can listen to my music if you so desire, or you can come to one of our events. I run 2 queer open mics in London every month, and Sean runs a vegan social event. But yeah, you can look for us online.
Now, and all of these events are now incel free, so you can come along. And well, actually, that's not true. We're just trying to control the incels. But also, if you want to donate to the charity that I work for, it's a food security charity. There's a link below to donate to a sponsor, Nivi, our friend from I Am Not Okay, who is running the Hackney Half Marathon. It's happening in May, so this will come out before that. Otherwise, you can click on the link to find out more about the charity if you're watching this in the future.
Yeah, so please do click through all the links, check us out, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening and watching. Leave us a comment, and we'll get back to you. Tell us about your mosquito proboscis related experiences.
Stay safe from mosquitoes and incels. Do what you can to protect yourself.
Exactly. All right. Until next week, folks. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.